Formal talk of this evening. I'm delighted to introduce Mr. David Farrant, who was one of the original investigators of the Highgate vampire case, and David will be talking about that this evening for us. So please make a warm welcome to David Farrant.
Thanks. Well, good evening. I need a microphone because I speak very softly, and you wouldn't hear me. Let me just say at the beginning, and I usually say this at the beginning of every talk I give, that I do not accept the existence of blood-sucking vampires. Full stop. Thanks a lot. I know that sounds rather a contradictory statement because this is supposed to be a talk about the Highgate vampire. I'll just say something else very quickly. I'm going to come on to the Highgate vampire, and after about half an hour I'll stop, and if anyone's got any questions, whatever they are, please ask. Now, I just wanted to say the Highgate vampire case, perhaps best well known for my association with that, because that investigation got completely out of hand way back in 1970. It was due to no fault of my own, except perhaps by being in Highgate Cemetery at night. Well, I was there in the daytime too, investigating. And the events spiraled, and I was taken to court in 1970 and accused by the police of hunting a vampire in Highgate Cemetery. I'm just going to tell you about that very briefly. I just wanted to point out, at the onset, that I was actually acquitted of that charge. It's unfortunate because many people don't realise that I was actually acquitted after the police tried to set me and members of the British Psychic and Occult Society, BPOS, of which I am president. They tried to set me up. Let me tell you what happened. Really, you have to be brief because it's a long story. Highgate Cemetery had been used for locations for many quite well-known films, I believe. Taste the Blood of Dracula was one of them. Dracula AD 1972 was another one. And The Body Beneath was made in 1969, that was yet another one, and there were more. I can't remember all the titles, I'm not really that interested because I'm not, to be honest with you, I'm not really interested in vampires. I am interested in psychic phenomena. But I do not accept, when I say vampire, let's be clear, let's not mix up words. So there's any misunderstanding. I am talking about the type of vampire that is portrayed in a Hammer horror movie. The one that sleeps in its coffin by day, supposedly, then wanders around at night, ravaging young ladies or going into young ladies' bedrooms, having a hypnotic control over them, making those people weaker and weaker when they eventually succumb to death, or a vampire sleep of the undead, as is supposedly known, and they themselves become vampires. That is what I do not accept. There is a basis, though, for the legend or the so-called existence of vampires, which is based on something which is, in fact, very real. Now, that is, in fact, the existence of the two entities, basically, male and female, known as the incubus and the succubus, respectively. They have been in existence down through the centuries, and are often known under many different names or titles, the old hag syndrome being one of them. I'm not going to tell you all that because I'm sure you all know that's the obvious. But it could be that all these legends of vampirism were based on the existence of these two entities. Now, I was visited by a young lady, a German lady, who was living in Wood Green in 1992. She had become a victim, if you like the word, of these nightly attacks. These attacks invariably take the form of a male or a female human being visited when they're asleep. They are suddenly awakened to find huge pressure pushing them to the bed or even kneeling on their chest. They are unable to scream. They are absolutely transfixed. This is what was happening with this lady that came to visit me at my flat in Highgate in 1992. She told me some interesting things. That she shared a flat in Wood Green with a girl, a flatmate, and she started having nightmares. And she was awakened at night by something pinning her to the bed. She couldn't move. It always happened when she was asleep, in a deep sleep or a light sleep, but she suddenly wake up and she was transfixed, physically transfixed, and I suppose you could say mentally. In the case of this girl, she began to lose a lot of weight. She began being prone to bouts of sleepwalking and also having nightmares. And she was very, very upset. I mean, she was even close to being suicidal. She didn't want to go to bed at night. We tried to help her and suggested quite a few things which I won't go into. We asked her to move the position of her bed and sleep in a different part of the room, etc., etc., etc. And she did this. She became weak. She became even weaker. She couldn't eat. She became anemic. And she was quite frankly in quite a state. She went to the doctor, but obviously she didn't tell him what all the symptoms were, because she didn't want to sort of say, I'm being visited by some sort of phantom spirit or gout at night. Because she instinctively realised that she might be taken as needing psychiatric help, and she didn't. I'm not saying some people don't, but in her case she did not. He confirmed that she was anemic. In fact, he prescribed iron capsules for her to help her. Her friend confirmed to me when I visited her flat that she was back, still continuing to sleepwalk, and she was getting very, very weak. The point I'm trying to make, and she also develops an aversion to very bright light. Now, if we think about it, the point I'm trying to make here, and I said I don't believe in vampires, I do not, full stop, but they could have some form. You know how the human mind exaggerates things when it sees an unexplained figure, an unexplained apparition. Indeed, 2 or 3 people will describe the same figure in a different way according to their upbringing, their culture, or deciding to what they personally think it is. Now, I think it's a very strong possibility, and I'm going to get on to the Highgate vampire thing in a minute. Just wanted to tell you this point first. That Bram Stoker himself, when he wrote his novel Dracula, he was aware of the existence of these nightly beings, the incubus and the succubus. I think it's highly probable that he based his original novel, or rather original fictional novel, Dracula, on the existence of people, these people who have been visited for centuries by these nightly beings. if you think about it, all the symptoms are the same. The girl became anemic, vampires drink blood. She began being prone to bouts of sleepwalking, exactly what happened in the case of this girl. She also developed an aversion to bright light, and she lost her appetite. All typical symptoms which Stoker and others, I mean, the person who wrote Varney the Vampire before that, or just after that, he may have been aware of the existence of these entities too. I think he based his novel Dracula on the existence, the real existence, that is, the real psychic existence of these two entities. We say male and female, but in psychic terms, nothing is really male or female. It's a combination of both, which you often find in Wicca or mysticism. The male principle and the female principle. The male principle being represented by the moon, female being represented by, the female being represented by the moon, night, the moon, the male being represented by the solar god, the sun. So I don't believe in vampires, horror-type vampires, but I do believe in the existence, the very real existence of these entities. And I'm sure they can often the existence of vampires in this respect can be explained. Now, you either accept the existence of psychic entities or you don't. Some people don't. Not that it really matters because it doesn't change anything. What I tell you is nothing to do with me. I'm just recording people's experience, and my own in some instances. But people often tend to put these things down to things which they don't really mean at all. In this case of Highgate Cemetery, I have to go quite quickly. We began investigating. There were reports of a local figure seen by many local witnesses since 1966. Invariably these descriptions took the form of a figure of about 7 or 8 foot tall, and often it was reported as having glaring or hypnotic red eyes. I interviewed two local people I was put in touch with. In the summer of 1969, there was the old lady who used to live, who would have now passed on because she was nearly 70 then. She used to live in the Holly Lodge estate, which was built at the back of Highgate Cemetery. Every night, regular habit, she used to take a small dog for a walk up Swains Lane, which runs alongside Highgate Cemetery. On one occasion, she was doing just this, and as she passed the main gate of the cemetery, she looked up. Well, first of all, she noticed the dog tried to whine and it tried to retreat, it tried to drag her back down the road. At the same instant, she looked up and she described a tall figure standing inside the main gate. And she told me quite personally that she almost felt as if it was glaring at her. The other was a qualified accountant who lived not far from Highgate Village. He went into Highgate Cemetery, and let's remember it was open to the public, at least in the daytime in those days. And he got hopelessly lost. But they used to ring a bell out to warn people to leave. They used to give 20 minutes notice. And he thought the best way to make his way back to the main gate from which the bell was ringing from was to make his way towards the sound of the bell. This he did, but he wandered off the main path, and Highgate Cemetery was such a maze in those days. He made for the sound of the bell, and all of a sudden, and he told me this personally, he just became aware of something standing behind him. He looked around quickly and he described the same figure, a tall, dark figure, about 8 feet, 7 or 8 feet tall. And he noticed it had alive eyes which were trying to hypnotise it. And at the same instance, the figure just wasn't there, it had gone. I was really interested in the fact that this particular person, was an architect, and architects tend to deal in facts and figures, and they're not really interested in things psychic. And this person wasn't interested in ghosts in the least. He was interested in architecture, and that's why he'd gone to Highgate Cemetery to take photographs and look around. As I said, it began to get dark and he got lost. So that was 2 people that witnessed this entity. There were others too in Highgate Village. There were more and more rumours flying around the place, which often you can't substantiate. One person tells another and it's spirits, and you never know where the truth lies. I only tend to record more or less concrete facts as far as it is possible to do. I went to the cemetery myself in late 1969 because I was trying to find some logical explanation that could have explained this, the appearance of this figure, which so many people, local people, had seen, and there were others. There weren't just these 2 people. I thought when I went to the cemetery, it could have been some large animal. There used to be foxes breeding in Highgate Cemetery at night, indeed there still are. There are definitely hedgehogs there, which make an almost terrifying noise if you wander, as they wander through the undergrowth at night, hunting being nocturnal. Just inside the top gate, I was walking down. My intention was to climb over the main gate and try and find the Thornton spot where he'd seen the entity and see if I could see anything. I saw a figure inside the gate. Now, because Highgate Cemetery, or rather Hammer horror movies, had used Highgate Cemetery for quite a few locations for their films, Highgate obviously came to be associated with vampires. This was in the public psyche. There were groups of people going to Highgate Cemetery, looking through the coffins. It was very, very serious desecration. After I saw this figure, I immediately assumed, I thought, well, it's obviously somebody, a solitary person, standing by the top gate, which was virtually deserted, dressed up in a long cloak as a vampire or something. He's trying to find, it wasn't dressed as a vampire, but it had a long black cloak, trying to frighten the odd passer-by and past the cemetery at night. So that was my first instinctive reaction. But I noticed something. It was a very, very cold night in December. And I noticed that the temperature around me had dropped, which was the case with quite a few other reports which would come on into the future. And looking up at this figure, I realised before very long it wasn't human. I didn't know what it was, but I instinctively realised it was rather like, being involved, rather like having a dream. And you want to wake up, but you can't. You know you're dreaming, but the more you want to wake up, the more it seems to be making you dream. It was that sort of experience. Because I've been involved in the past, years before that, in a mystical order, I know how to protect myself against some of these entities. And I mentally repeated a Kabbalistic incantation, and the thing suddenly just disappeared. It just wasn't there. So we started a full-scale, after I'd seen the entity, we started a full-scale investigation by the BPOS to try and get more information. I appealed for local information by writing to a local newspaper, to Ham and High. I spoke to many local people, and I guess that's where the trouble started, because we actually entered Highgate Cemetery one night in the course of this investigation. There were 5 of us, and we had with us a psychic medium. The purpose of the medium was to attempt to make some sort of communication with the entity and find out its purpose. If it was earthbound, well, obviously it seemed to be earthbound. What its name was, who it was, who it had been in life, why it was there, was it a restless spirit or what? We had with us certain implements, but basically we all had small Celtic crosses. I had my camera, I had a very small portable tape recorder, and we had a little bit of charcoal to burn, which was meant to represent the element of fire. Now, towards the end of this seance, well, if you like, it just started, but we couldn't get finished because we heard the sound of very loud voices and I was shouting. Oh, by the way, this ceremony took place, or was about to take place, near the back of Highgate Cemetery, near the back gate. And we suddenly realised it was the police. They had flashlights and we come into cars which were parked at the main gate. I had a notion, I knew somebody, I knew a family actually who lived on South Grove, which was the road that runs back from Highgate Cemetery, and its garden virtually backs onto Highgate Cemetery. It's only separated by a small fence. I thought if I got at an angle at which the police were approaching, just up a little towards their house, I could climb over, and if I got caught in there at night, it wouldn't really matter because I knew the people. It was better than sort of being caught by the police. I was caught by a flashlight when I was just about to climb over the fence of this house. I threw down the portable tape recorder. Oh, incidentally, I'll tell you the purpose of this in a minute. I was also carrying a stake. It's not as sinister as it sounds. I'll explain why in a minute. I immediately, the stake, the camera, and the other I had a torch. I threw them at the base of the gravestone. I was asked to name the other people. I was arrested. I refused to name the other people because they were all serious psychic investigators and they were at quite high up positions, jobs. And I didn't want, and they didn't want any publicity like that, and I didn't want to attract that publicity to the society. So I refused to name them, and they could, and I also refused to give them my address. And the policeman at the station, it was Kentish Town Police Station, he decided I was being very uncooperative. And he said, if you plead guilty to this charge tomorrow, you'll just be released. You'll get a caution for trespass, and the whole thing will be over with no publicity, and you won't have to bring any other people into it. And because I wouldn't give them my address, I was kept in custody overnight. And when the press later reported my arrest, they wrote David Farrant of no fixed address. Well, I wouldn't give them my address, because if they'd have gone to my flat in Highgate, I had all the society records there. That people's name and photographs in the membership books. So that's the reason for that. I also gave the police a false name. It was Alan something or other. Just to ensure that we kept their part. Well, just to ensure that it kept their part of the bargain and the case would be over very quickly. Now I went to court the next morning, And just months prior to that, let me just check the time. I've got 5 minutes, so I'll tell you quickly. There'd been unlimited vandalism at Highgate Cemetery. I'm not talking about vandals going over, knocking over vases or daubing paint on the tombs. I'm talking about serious, heavy-duty vandalism. People opening the Victorian coffins and actually driving wooden stakes through the corpses in Highgate Cemetery. That happened. It's all on record, and it was happening. Then, because of all that damage, increased to an incredible degree. I pleaded guilty to the charge under a false name and without giving my address, because the officer in charge of that case, Detective Neville Brown, told the magistrate that there had been unlimited damage at Highgate Cemetery, and he was describing the damage, how people had opened coffins, staked the corpses, due mainly to this idea from Hammer horror films, I suppose. And it was believed that I was one of those people responsible. Now, when I went to the police station, I had originally interviewed, I saw the implements they had taken lined up on the desk. On the desk in this detective sergeant's office, a camera, a tape recorder, the stake attached to a piece of cord, and a torch. All the police produced at the case, at the court case, was the stake and the cross, minus the cord. Now, when I'd applied for bail, some 2 weeks before this, I'm not going to start reading you chapters or anything, I just want to read you 2 or 3 lines. When I'd applied for bail some 2 or 3 weeks before this, which was granted, it was reported in a paper called the Haunted Journal, I believe the Ham and High. They objected to bail, but I actually won the bail application. And the police, what they did was they attributed a statement to me, which I never made. The statement was that I intended to go into Highgate Cemetery looking for the king vampire, opening coffins if necessary, and when I found it, I was going to drive my wooden stake through its heart and run away. I never made that statement, which was why I never signed it, which was why when it was produced it was never signed. But the police said that in open court, and of course it was almost an admission that I had said to the police, yeah, I was going to go in there with the stake. I'd expecting me to open a coffin with a stake, I don't know, a wooden stake, and start staking corpses. It just wasn't true. I won that bail application, but as I said, when they produced the stake and the cross, which everybody had to take with them for protection, the newspaper, on the bail application, the newspaper recorded it as saying, Detective Neville Brown produced in evidence a large wooden stake, a sharp wooden stake and a piece of rope. In fact, it wasn't a piece of rope, it was a piece of cord. It was a piece of cord. And the purpose of that this was a failed application, I wasn't present when I won it. When they came, after I'd been arrested at Highgate Cemetery and the case was back to court, they didn't even produce the piece of cord, they just produced a piece of rope, sorry, not the piece of rope, the stake and the wooden cross. It was one huge effort to set me up. And I wasn't guilty of it, but that's why I explained that in court. I was not a vampire. I did not even believe in vampires. I was a serious psychic investigator. I was being made a scapegoat for all the heavy, serious vandalism in Highgate Cemetery, which had been caused by, influenced by, I think, the Hammer horror films, and also the statements of another person that were made on 2 television programs who was advising people how to stake vampires. He appeared on the programs with a wooden stake and a cross, and he told the audience of millions on 2 occasions, once ITV and the BBC, in order to destroy a vampire, you must first cut off its head with a grave. No, I'm sorry, I've got them the wrong way around, not that it makes any difference, but I suppose it would still be dead. He said, stake it through the heart with 1 blow, cut off its head with a gravedigger shovel, and burn what remains. That was said on the television. Now can you imagine the influence, the bad influence that would have had on all these people? I was in court, and I'm trying to be set up for it. That's what really happened in a nutshell. A lot more happened. I haven't possibly got time. And as I explained, just one little thing here. I'll better stop for questions. One little thing here. The original purpose of the stake and the piece of cord, which the police had removed, because when you cast a protective circle, in some mystical orders, with many others, you use a stake attached to a piece of cord, which is in turn attached to a piece of chalk or whitewash or anything you want to make a circle with. That is the purpose of the real purpose of the stake. And also the stake was engraved with protective symbols. It wasn't a stake of vampire with. But anyway, that's what happened at Highgate Cemetery. But I was acquitted, but I got branded as a vampire hunter. I finished where I began, that I do not believe in blood-sucking vampires. I do believe in various types of psychic entities, some of which can remain earthbound. And I also believe in the importance of understanding the human psyche. All these things are related, which in turn is related to levels of consciousness, subconsciousness, but I won't have time to go into that here. So I'm not a vampire hunter. I never have been. Please believe me. Just one little thing, let me slip in here. And I really will stop for questions. When the case was arrested in August, it came to court in September of that year. It was adjourned 2 or 3 times. And on the second occasion, I'm not here to tell jokes, but this is really true, the name of the magistrate was Christopher Lee. Yeah, I know it's funny now, but it wasn't looking back on it.
Okay, excellent. We've got time for 2 questions, I think. So anyone from the audience? I saw John first and then Bill.
Hello, David. You said that you thought a vampire might be a description for an incubus or a succubus, and certainly the Dracula novels do have some similarities. But I was wondering, I mean, we don't really have a vampire culture in this country before the Dracula novels. Very few specific events. Vampire cultures tend to be in Eastern Europe. I think there are mainly in Scotland's the Glory. Now, I was wondering if you'd ever looked into the vampire cultures of Eastern Europe and found if they possibly connected up in the same way?
No, I haven't. You see, sorry, I'm a psychic investigator, and I've looked into all types of psychic phenomena. Yes, looked into the existence of the incubus and the succubus, many apparitions, and poltergeist activity. Our investigations go a bit deeper than that. I haven't got much time at the moment. Very quickly, if you're looking into poltergeists, you often find objects moving, falling off shelves, light bulbs exploding, effects on electrical systems, all that sort of thing. I always put down to some sort of outside entity visiting a human being. They always take place invariably at night, just like the incubus and the succubus. When people were suddenly awakened, rather than light sleep or a fairly light sleep, I think those instances can be put down to activities in the human mind itself, levels of consciousness which are dormant, more so in some people, less so in more sensitive people. When the conscious mind is at rest, it no longer acts as a barrier to these deeper forces, these deeper levels. When the conscious mind is at rest, it is invariably when it is asleep at night. This is why poltergeist activity often occurs at night. There's a reason for this, and I'm sure that often, I've investigated so many cases, and I'm sure often, more often than not, the people that are causing these things to happen, the objects to fall off the shelves, the gas taps turn themselves on and off, are not even aware they're doing it. They even believe it is the existence of a psychic entity, which actually strengthens it and ironically makes it worse. I'm just trying to say to you, I've never investigated. The answer to your question is no, because I don't believe the human body can exist in that manner after physical death. I hope that answers it. I hope that answers your question.
So that's all we've got time for, I think. Oh, Bill Thomas, sorry.
Possibly, perhaps a bit of the last one, but you said you accepted the existence of the incubus and succubus as real entities. But what I was going to say was surely 99% of such incidents can be accounted for as can't be hallucinations, can't they?
Yeah, here we come on to the old skeptic argument, everything must be hallucination. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to offend anybody. Everything must be an hallucination. But look, a dream is an hallucination, in a way. It has no real existence, but it still exists. Is that what you meant? I mean, I can't go into this, there's not enough time, but... Well, of course. Where else? Where else could they originate? No. I was referring to poltergeist activity. I don't want to confuse the two. The activity of poltergeists. I said a lot of it might be attributable to forces in the human mind that are unrecognised by the person themselves. When I said the incubus and the succubus, I did explain that these entities have been known. The existence of these entities has been passed down in different forms or another for centuries upon centuries, and that possibly this influenced Bram Stoker to write his novel Dracula. So I hope that explains the difference between those two things.
Fantastic, excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think that's about all we've got time for. So please put your hands together for David Farrant.